Hello, my name is Sheila Bugler. I'm an Irish crime writer. I'm living in Eastbourne, and I'm here today to talk to you about my new novel, which is called I Could Be You. It's set in Eastbourne, and it's recently been part of the East Sussex online reading group, which has been amazing because loads of people in Eastbourne and East Sussex have read it. And lots of you have sent in questions today, so thank you very much indeed. As many of you know, today's event was meant to be a live event in the library, which I was really looking forward to because I love doing live events. But obviously under current conditions, we can't do that. So we're going to try, we haven't done this before, we're going to try to answer all of your questions like this in a recording, which is going up on the library website later in the week. Now, before I move on to the questions, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about me and how I ended up living in Eastbourne. So as you can hear from my accent, I'm from Ireland. I grew up in a little town in the west of Ireland called Ballinasloe. I went to university in Galway and I studied psychology, and I was very young when I finished university. I was 21. And even though I hadn't much wisdom about anything at all, I had the wisdom to realise that at 21, I wasn't mature enough to go into the field of psychology as a professional. So I did a TEFL course, which is teaching English as a foreign language. And I travelled for the next few years. I worked in Italy, Spain, Argentina, Germany, Holland. I think they're the main countries, working as an English teacher. I then moved back to London, where I did lots and lots of different jobs. And in between doing lots of different jobs, I got married and I had 2 kids. And after my second child was born, I started to write, which was something I'd always wanted to do, but never had the confidence. Since then, I've had 4 novels published. My first 3 novels feature a detective called Ellen Kelly, and they're all set in South London, where I used to live. In 2013, just when my first book was coming out, we decided as a family to move to Eastbourne because I grew up by the sea in the countryside in Ireland, and I wanted something similar for my kids. So we moved to Eastbourne in 2013, and it has been beyond doubt the best thing we've ever done as a family. We love living here, and I hope that my love of Eastbourne comes across in my new book, which I'm now going to start talking about. So once again, this is the book. It's called I Could Be You, and it's available in all good bookshops. It's available on Amazon as a paperback, a Kindle, and an audiobook. And of course, it is also available to borrow for free in all formats from East Sussex libraries, who have just been amazing in supporting me and supporting my book, and I'm hugely grateful to them. So I've got the questions here beside me, so excuse me if I look away from the screen occasionally. Okay. Let's see. So my first few questions come from somebody called Chatterbooks, and I kind of guessing, looking at Chatterbooks and looking at the questions, that you're a reading group. So hello. And I'm going to read out the first question from Chatterbooks, which says, "We noticed a subtle likeness in the beginning between Dee and Katie, their personalities and the way they looked, i.e. overweight and obsessive about other girls' looks, a bleak demeanour, etc. Was this a conscious decision to make these characters alike? The thought that Dee could be Katie briefly seemed a possibility in the beginning." Wow, that's a really interesting question. So Dee Doran is the main character in the novel, and she's the character who goes through the series, because I Could Be Used the first in a series of Eastbourne novels. And Katie is one of the other main characters who only appears in this book. And Chatterbooks, the answer is no, actually. I hadn't deliberately thought of a likeness between Dee and Katie. I guess the similarities for me is that they're both, at the start of the novel, they're both people who are unhappy in their lives. And I think, like a lot of unhappy women and girls, sometimes we don't focus on the things that are really making us unhappy. Instead, we focus on the superficial things like, oh, I've put on weight, or I'm not pretty enough, or whatever. And in Dee's case, although she doesn't really think like that, she's a woman in her early 50s, like me. And she's really aware, I think, of the fact that she's getting older and she's losing, her body's changing. She's just starting the menopause. So that's kind of where she is. Whereas Katie's a much younger character, and her unhappiness is caused much more by an unhappy childhood, an unhappy background. But no, I didn't deliberately think of them as being similar. So that's probably my subconscious coming through there. Now, your next question again from Chatterbooks is, we love the setting of the book, obviously, and wondered if Sheila had personally walked some of the journeys Dee made in researching the book. Well, first of all, I'm really glad you love the setting because, as I said, I really think Eastbourne is very special. I think its location on the edge of the South Downs and on the coast is really quite incredible. So I haven't walked any of the settings as a research for the book, but in my life, I have walked all of those settings. So anywhere Dee has been, anywhere Dee goes in the book, I have been there in person. And somebody did ask me, so Dee lives in a really big, beautiful architect design house on the coast in between Pevensey Bay and Norman's Bay. And someone asked me once, did I live there? Is that where I lived? And my answer was no, but it's where I wish I could live. So she kind of lives in my ideal house, in my ideal location, because I think that stretch of beach between Pevensey Bay and Couden Beach is just really, really beautiful. And I would absolutely love to live there, but I can't afford it yet. Okay, so the next question again from Chatterbooks is, there were a lot of characters in the story, and at times it was hard to keep track. Is this a decision Sheila makes early on in planning to have all these characters with different roles? Or do these characters make an appearance as the story progresses? Sorry, first of all, there probably are a lot of characters. I definitely don't plan to have that many at the beginning. But I'm certainly a writer for whom character comes before plot, and I think when I start to write, characters just come to me very easily, and some of them are so strong in my head, I feel like I want to put them in the book. However, it's certainly worth thinking about making sure I don't put too many in the next time. Now then, the next question is, with this in mind, how does Sheila work on her storyline? What does she use to prompt herself as a reminder of the part each character is playing? It's really difficult, is the answer. The whole plotting of a novel is really hard. I'm not a visual person, so I don't work with mind maps or anything like that. So most of the time it's just in my head, kind of driving me crazy the whole time. And I keep all of the different plot bits going in my head. This time, working on the sequel to I Could Be You, I have tried to change my plotting approach slightly. Thanks to a friend of mine who is also a writer, and what she does is she plots really, really detailed plotting at the beginning, but she uses PowerPoint, and she plots all of her story out on PowerPoint slides. And I'm trying that this time, and so far I think it's working quite well. But obviously the proof is in the finished book, so we'll have to see. Hey, now Alex, this is the last question from Chatterbooks. Alex was one of the characters we felt had a bit part. What was the purpose of Alex in the plot? Okay, so Alex is a character. He's not very nice, really. He's a bit of a kind of waster and a womanizer, and Dee has a short-lived affair, some kind of affair with him. Romance, I'd say, more than affair. And what is the purpose of Alex? I think probably, if I'm being really honest, he's just one of those people who came to me. He probably does represent a certain type of man, sort of, early 50s, married but not faithful, still thinks he's a bit of a handsome thing and sort of always on the lookout for the next bit of romance. So he is a bit part, but I think for me, the role he played was sort of Dee realising that she fancied somebody again, which was a really big thing after coming out of a divorce where she was very bruised emotionally, and also her having the courage when she realised he wasn't a very nice person to just get rid of him. So that for me, that's the purpose Alex has. And that's all the questions from Chatterbooks, so thank you very much. And now we're moving on to a question from Michelle, which is a lovely question. Michelle says, when, not if by the way, when, and she's put that in bold, when I Could Be You is adapted for TV, who would you cast in the lead roles? And it's difficult not to pass Brenda Blethyn for D, to be honest with you, but she's already been stolen for Vera. So an actress like her, maybe, do you know who? Amanda Redman. I think she'd make a really good D, actually. I'd like her as D. And then for the other characters, I don't really know, except Ed Mitchell. Oh, do you know what? If John Thor was still alive, he would be my perfect Ed Mitchell. But sadly, he's not with us anymore. But he would be the perfect character for me, definitely, to play Ed Mitchell, who is the main detective in the novel, and potential romance interest for Dee as well. Okay, so thank you very much, Michelle. I love that question. Philippa says that place and plot are two essentials, it seems, these days for crime thrillers. Will your book upend the image of genteel Eastbourne as the perfect pensioner holiday destination? I kind of hope it doesn't upend it too much. I really love Eastbourne as it is, and I certainly my intention wasn't to kind of maybe change perceptions a little bit, actually. Maybe it was because I think there's much more to Eastbourne than just a sort of pensioner holiday destination. I think it's a really vibrant town, lots of young people living here, it's got an amazing cultural scene. So yes, maybe my intention was to change that perception a little bit, but in a positive bit, I hope, not in a negative bit. And I completely agree. I think plot and location are really key for crime novels. And I hope it came across that I really do care about that. Now we've got two questions from Miriam. And her first question is, do you have a favourite character in the books you write? If so, who was your favourite character in I Could Be You? Well, people who have read the book will know why I'm taking a breath when I say this. I think my favourite character was Trevor. He is a journalist that Dee worked with, and he is sort of handsome and charming, and he was great fun to write. And also, this is an aside story, so I hope I have time for this, but I'm sure they'll cut me out if I don't. They'll edit me out. Trevor Dubber, there is a real life Trevor Dubber. And he he's the manager of a supermarket where my parents live, and his wife is a huge fan of my books. So as a surprise, we put Trevor into one of my books and didn't tell her, and then I sent her a signed copy of the book, and she had a great laugh. She found it really funny to read about her husband in the book, particularly because I make Trevor in the book a really handsome, sort of devastatingly attractive silver fox. And I think she liked that I did that, and kind of reinvented her husband in a little cheeky way. Okay, and Miriam's second question is, as a resident of Eastbourne, I was surprised at how accurate the geography of your book is. Are you always that true to life in the places you depict in your books, and if so, why? Okay, yes, I am. And the reason for that is, as I've said already, I think location is really key in crime novels. A bugbear for me a little bit is crime novels that are set in fictional locations for no real reason. And when I wrote my Ellen Kelly books, one of the consistent bits of feedback I got was how authentic the location was. And I definitely wanted to do that with Eastbourne, which I guess goes back to Philippa's question. You know, Eastbourne is more than just a perfect holiday destination for pensioners, and I wanted to kind of get all sides of it in the book, I think. So thank you, Miriam. Now, Anne-Marie says, I loved Dee Doran. I think she's great and far less uptight than Ellen. Will we see more of Dee, or will the two women ever meet in a novel? So as I said, Ellen Kelly is the character from my first books. I think I might know this Anne-Marie. Anyway, maybe. And it's quite a funny question because Dee Doran is a kind of a mix of lots of brilliant women I know, lots of my wonderful, brilliant, strong, clever, funny, good fun female friends. So if you're the Anne-Marie I think you are, I'm really, really glad that you like Dee Doran, because there's a little bit of you in there. Okay, Sarah Reed has asked, how important is setting in your novels? And I think I've kind of already answered that. It's really important to me. And I hope I can't imagine writing a novel where setting wouldn't be really important. And Sarah also says, as a writer, are you a pantster or a plotter? And for those of you that don't know, a pantster is a writer who kind of works out the plot by the seat of their pants and doesn't do any plotting in advance. I spoke a little bit earlier about how I have kind of I'm trying out new ways of plotting my books in advance. When I started writing, I was definitely somebody who didn't plot my novels in advance. And it's a really enjoyable way to write because you can be completely creative and you can just go wherever you want and see what happens. But when you are like me, you're signed into a contract, and my contract at the moment is to write a book every 6 months, which is a challenge alongside, a day job and a family and everything else. So I have found that it's not the most efficient way to write, that I need. It's actually much more efficient to at least get a bit of a plot worked out first. So now what I try to do, it's still really painful. The whole plotting process is really painful for me. So I try to plot it first. I then tend to write a first draft, which inevitably goes far, far away from the initial plot I had. I then try to re-plot it, and then I write a second draft, which again goes a bit askew, and then I re-plot again, and then I write a third draft. And that is my very, very painful process for writing. It takes ages, and I'm sure there's a better way to do it, but I can't seem to get to a better way. But I'll keep trying. Okay, then Anna has said, what inspired you to write crime fiction? And lots of people ask me that question. And I think that writers can't choose the fiction they write. I think you are the type of writer you are, and I didn't really know that until I started writing. So I read really widely. I have always loved crime fiction, but I read much wider than crime fiction. I grew up reading lots of literary fiction. Very precociously read Anna Karenina when I was 12, which is probably too young. But I write crime fiction because I think it's kind of the only fiction I can write. I love it. I love the genre, and I can't really imagine myself ever writing anything else. I have dabbled in short stories and stuff like that, but I always come back to crime, no matter, and I probably will. And I'm very happy with that as well. Anna also says, I read in your website that you're from Ireland, and then in brackets, so am I. How did you end up living in Eastbourne? So I think I've answered that. We moved from London in 2013, and it was brilliant, and we love it. Now, John has said, what was the inspiration for choosing Eastbourne as the location for your new crime series? Okay, so the inspiration, I love it. I love Eastbourne. I think it's really special. I did find it very funny that the recent TV series Flesh and Blood was based here, and that the family lived on the same stretch of beach where Dee lives, which just goes to show that I'm not the only person that thinks that little stretch of beach is very, very special. And John also says, your main character, Dee Doran, is a journalist. Why did you choose to write about a journalist, not a police detective? Okay, thank you, John. Two reasons, really. So my first series with Ellen Kelly, she's a police detective. I'd kind of done that. And I did want to write a series with a main character who wasn't a detective. And the main reason for that is kind of lazy, really. I am not very good at doing research before I write. And if you write a police procedural novel with a detective as your main character, there's an obligation to get all your police stuff right. And I just found that really hard. So it was like a bit of an easy way out to choose a journalist as well, because with a journalist I have more freedom. She doesn't have to follow the rules. She can do what she wants. And it kind of got me out of doing all of that, really, which I find really difficult, that kind of researching all the police procedural stuff. So that's why I do as a journalist. Plus I love journalists. Loads of my friends are journalists. Now, Val says, when you start writing a new book, where do you get your inspiration from? I think obviously this is something that writers are asked a lot. Excuse me, Val, I'm just going to take a sip of water before I answer. I can't speak for other writers, but I just think my problem is I've got almost too much inspiration. I'm constantly having ideas of things I want to write. And what I find challenging is kind of narrowing all those ideas down to a single book, which probably goes back to the question that was asked earlier about having so many characters in a book. I've just got all of these people I want to write about, all of these scenarios in my head. So I think my inspiration just kind of comes from everywhere, really. It's all there, and I just need to get it out. And Val also says, how do you keep your thoughts and ideas in order to write about them in a cohesive way? Maybe you write them down as lists. So I don't write them down as lists, but what I do when I'm working, so I work on a computer, that's how I write, and probably the reason I can have such a painful process of producing 3 drafts before I get the book done is because I'm a very fast touch typist, which has been a lifesaver. So when I'm writing, I have 2 documents open. I have the novel I'm working on, and I have another document which is notes, and I'm constantly going between the 2, and every time I think of something, I make a note of it. And when I'm at the end of the 3rd draft, I go through all of those notes and I make sure that I have addressed every single one of them in the final novel before it gets sent off to my publisher, to my agent. And Mimi says, hi Sheila, your books have great plots. How much preparation do you do on the plot before you sit down to start writing? Do you know more or less what happens when and how it ends? And I suppose I've kind of answered that, Mimi. I like to think I know what's going to happen, but inevitably something else happens instead. And I like to think I know how the novel's going to end. And again, inevitably I get that wrong as well. And actually, I have kind of flown through that. So I've answered all of the questions that I got sent by the library. I really, really, really hope that people have enjoyed this question and answer. And I really hope, if you haven't read the book, that you read it and borrow it from the library because, they're doing this event and they're brilliant. And I have got a website, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. So if you have any questions, if you would like me to come and speak to a reading group, or you just want to get in touch about anything, contact me. I love hearing from readers. So please do get in touch. And thank you very much for listening to me this afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.